Welcome to Fitbyfood, where we outsmart binge eating without restriction. In this video, I want to talk about the thing that we don't hear too much about, but it is our negative association to our belly. Think about it. It's very feminine to have a very small waist and big hips. And for someone that has a past of binge eating and emotionally eating, we oftentimes, I'm speaking from experience since I've had problems with binging for over 10 years. We have a habit and a cycle of we eat a lot of food and then our belly becomes stretched, which is the proof of our weakness. We feel the stretched belly after a binge or after we've eaten a lot of food, and it's the reminder of what we've done. We've had so many past memories of binging and caving, eating the foods that we fixate on, to reality escape, to dissociate from our body because we're not really self-regulating in a very sustainable way. So we used food for a long time as our coping mechanism to get by with anxious, overwhelming feelings. And this habit really makes the body disconnect from the mind. We're trying to push down the feelings, push down the bodies, telling us, the body's communicating that something is not right. We're feeling too much right now, we're feeling anxious, and the mind is answering the body with trying to keep, like, not hearing, to try to keep out the sound. So we're trying to dissociate the body's signal by shoving down foods in our stomach. We're trying to distract ourselves. With this behavior, it's also very common to reality escape with watching something on YouTube or Netflix, and reality escaping the mind as well. So we're trying to flee our situation, our life. We're trying to flee because it's too much and we don't know how to really hold ourselves in this experience. So we fixate on food. When we use our coping mechanism, it is the war between the mind and the body. And the body, since it has the signaling system that's telling us we need to fuel now, we need something inside our body in order to continue living. This is a survival mechanism. And if the mind has made up its mind and thinks, no, we're not going to eat, we're going to compensate for the binge that we had a few days ago, so we're trying to keep the calories to a minimum, and then doesn't listen to the signals from the body, we will have this disconnect, and eventually the body will win because it's a survival mechanism. It's stronger than your willpower from just trying to use harshness to control this coping mechanism. When we then cave, we're blaming our body for being weak. We've caved, we've binged on whatever foods we have at home or bought, and then afterwards we feel so guilty and so bad, and we send so much negativity and guilt down to our body, and we don't take responsibility for this because we think just that it's the body's fault. This is not conscious, this is unconscious. So we blame the body and we blame the stomach. We blame the stomach because this is the first point in our body that tells us that we've eaten too much. We have receptor cells in the body. That's their job to tell us when our body, or to tell us when our stomach is stretched, so that we're aware now that we don't need to eat anymore. The body is just doing its job. It's responding to the disharmony that happened between having a war between the mind and the body, and then eventually caving and getting the consequence of we binge because we're so disharmonized. And then the mind feels like a victim and blames the body for being weak. And the war becomes even wider. The stomach gets a lot of negativity because it's reminding us all the time that we're super full. And then when we become aware of this, from the signaling system inside the stomach to our aware mind, it awakes so much criticism. So we hold a lot of shame here. a lot of guilt that we don't want to feel. I can tell you a personal story where I first realized that I always constantly suck in my stomach. And this is very common. You might not be aware of it, but you're probably doing it right now. And this is a compensating thing for having shame around our stomach being full. So we're trying to suck in our stomach because we want to appear smaller or thinner than what we might be, or because our stomach is stretched from the binge that we had. So we want to suck it in because we want to hide it. And this is very symbolic for this coping mechanism. I was in a workshop where we had to do conscious breathing. So we just focused on breathing in and breathing out. This was maybe like 5 years ago. The woman who had the workshop came over to me after 10 minutes or so, and she placed a hand on top of my stomach and she said, "Release." And I thought, I am releasing. What does she mean? And then I tried to release deeper. And I realized that I didn't know my threshold for the release because I was constantly sucking in my stomach. And when I realized this, it was such sorrow that came over me inside my body. I felt such grief for really mistreating my body and also my stomach, because it's actually we who unconsciously do this coping mechanism. We are the ones that make this happen, and we have to take responsibility for our wholeness, our whole being, and not blame something else for caving and not being strong enough. I find this incredibly sad, and it is very sad, because the conflict that happens between the mind and the body just becomes wider and wider when we keep continuing to blame our stomach for just responding to its job. We shouldn't blame the body. The body's just doing its job, and it's amazing it's doing its job. We're pushing down so much food and it keeps giving us results. It keeps breaking down the food and compartmentalizing it wherever it needs to go. And us responding to our weakness or caving with harshness and blaming the body and feeling so much self-loathing is just making this habit worse. Here at Fitbyfood, I really approach binge and emotional eating with softness. I do not suggest stopping your coping mechanism straight away. Quite the opposite. I suggest you change the diet. You change what you snack on, what you binge on, and you choose foods that are better for your health. You do this so that you can still snack, still have your coping mechanism, but you can start to approach the core wound. And that is the entire Fitbyfood journey. We begin with changing the diet onto a plant-based, high-carb, low-fat diet, which allows you to binge if you need to, but it's a more forgiving diet. It doesn't make you gain weight. So we keep the coping mechanism, and then we start to look at the habits, both physical and mental. What belief systems or what patterns do we have? What habits do we do daily? And then we go into the core wound, the center of it all. And that's where we start to explore more deeply our inner landscape. We start to use archetypes and exploring the unconscious a bit more. But in order to do that, I suggest first changing the diet so you can keep the coping mechanism, then switching up your habits so that you can have more tools and ways to regulate yourself. And then we go into the more triggering territory. On this journey, it's a lot of unpacking to do, really. We need to approach this with softness and from an understanding that we're just doing our best. We're just trying to regulate ourselves, and we haven't gotten a really healthy example of how to do this. And this is what we're really trying to relearn. And on this journey we have to forgive ourselves for blaming the body and blaming the stomach. But we can't really be held accountable if we didn't know better. And this is what I'm doing here at Fitbyfood. I want to increase your awareness around this topic so that you can get responsibility when it comes to this habit and see that it's just self-sabotaging. There is alternative ways. So subscribe for more content on this topic, and remember, it is possible to get fit by food.